is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate for the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate or encourage any illegal activity and advise all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws by visiting NORML.org, NORML.org. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers of NORML Show Live are their own and do not necessarily reflect the philosophy and policies of NORML. Listener discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think we need to rethink and decriminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws presents NORML Show Live, Marijuana Nation. Now, here's your host, NORML's Outreach Coordinator, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokats, and welcome. It is Monday, March 12, 2012, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Welcome to the show. We're so glad you could be here. I'm back from Houston, and that means I'm one day closer to you, just like the Gatlin brothers sang back in the day. Also joining us here in the studio, we have got the wonderful Ganja John hanging out over here to the right.
What is up, Russ?
Oh, we got your mic is not.
Yeah, it is up. Now it's up. What's up, Russ? How you doing?
I had myself a hell of a weekend, I'm telling you, and we're going to talk about it.
I can't wait to hear about it.
Oh yeah, all throughout hour two. I hope you had a good weekend too.
Oh yeah, I did, absolutely. I had the best meal of my life last night, and then this morning threw up.
Oh, well,
but
that's
I'm feeling better now.
Yeah, all right. We don't want you throwing up. That's a bummer. Speaking of bummers, also, Cannabis Carrie is not with us from the virtual studio because
Huge bummer.
Car troubles getting back and forth and around.
Drove over a piece of wood, wrecked a rim.
Yeah, it's
broke a fuel pump, all kinds of
I know. We'll get her take on that probably on tomorrow's show. Also joining us here, we've got Wiz Kaliko hanging out at the end of the table. How you doing, Wiz?
Hey. Glad to be here. Doing good. Doing well.
All right. And so we'll have plenty to talk about in hour two because today I'm pretty much going to go over my experience at the Baker Institute debating Dr. Kevin Sabet. Some of you have seen that already. For those who haven't, in the Radical Rant today, I'm going to play my full 20-minute presentation there at the Baker Institute. And then in hour two, we're going to play Kevin Sabet's response and then our back and forth. But I've got the pause button. We can pause and stop and talk about this stuff, and I can give you exactly how he's trying to fool you and what you need to use to debunk that kind of reefer madness. So that's going to be the whole focus of today's show. Plus, the rest of the week, I'll be bringing you clips from that Baker Institute conference. There's so many great speakers there. Ethan Nadelman, Professor Alex Stevens from the University of Kent. We also had Reverend Edwin Saunders from Nashville, Tennessee. Amazing speaker. We'll bring all that to you. Also on today's show, it's Roots Monday, so we get your daily Toker Tunes. I'm going to bring you some music from Stanley Jordan, some jazz music today, some capital J. That's what you call it when you roll it in Washington, D.C., a capital J. And then coming up later on the NORML Network, we've got podcasts from Texas that are going to be bringing you exclusive coverage of the Baker Institute Conference, including Dean Becker with the Drug Truth Network. He interviewed myself and others there at the conference. And we'll also have Can of Truth Reefer Rhetoric featuring Professor Blunston and Dean Schwag, two of the coolest guys you could ever meet. We'll talk more about that in hour two as well. So stay tuned. It's NORML Show Live. We're back after these messages.
You're listening to NORML Show Live, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Hi, I'm Radical Russ. One of the best things about marijuana is the wonderful aroma. But when you travel a lot like I do, that aroma becomes a suspicious smell. That's why I endorse stealth-products.com, the leaders in smell-proof containers. From smell-proof vacuum bags to smell-proof backpacks and duffel bags, all the way to smell-proof digital safes, stealth-products.com has you covered. Stealth-products.com brings you safe, secure, odorless layers of protection with activated carbon fiber. Backpacks and duffel bags are simple black so as not to attract attention with a logo or flashy design. Now, nothing is perfectly odor controlled from the detection of drug dogs, but with proper vigilance, containers from stealth-products.com will help you avoid nosy humans.
You're now listening to Illit Beats.
Stealth-products.com. Stealth-products.com.
This is NORML Show Live.
Weedmaps.com. I'm Radical Russ from NORML. In my job as outreach coordinator, I travel every month, and when I'm on the road, I need a fast, accurate way to find the medical marijuana dispensaries in the area. So I turn to Weedmaps.com. Weedmaps.com has the best dispensary locator online or on your mobile device. Search by zip code or let Weedmaps find you, and in seconds you'll have the addresses, phone numbers, and customer service reviews for the medical marijuana dispensaries in the local area. Weedmaps.com also has a section devoted to helping you find a doctor who understands and recommends medical marijuana under your state's law. You can even check prices on the Medical Marijuana Stock Exchange. Coming soon, you'll even be able to find the listings of NORML attorneys and chapters, local head shops and grow shops, and the best weed-friendly businesses. Weedmaps.com has the information you need to be an informed cannabis consumer. Visit Weedmaps.com today, a proud sponsor of the NORML Network.
Inhaling deeply of the sacred smoke.
Medical marijuana, industrial hemp, consumer cannabis. It's time for this week's NORML News with Cannabis Carey.
Cannabis Carey is unable to join us today, so I'm Radical Russ here with your NORML News. This weekend, Thursday and Friday to be precise, there was a drug policy forum at the Baker Institute for Public Policy at Rice University in Houston, Texas. I was a part of this forum that was entitled "The War on Drugs Has Failed. Is legalization the answer?" Speakers included NORML Advisory Board member and PBS travel host Rick Steves, Ethan Nadelman, the executive director of the Drug Policy Alliance, Professor Alex Stevens from the University of Kent, Reverend Edwin Saunders from Interdenominational Church in Nashville, Tennessee, and so many others. It's really worth your time to go out and find that video. I've got it posted at our blog at stash.norml.org. I've also got a Huffington Post piece up on it, so the links are there if you want to see all of these presentations. We'll be bringing you a lot of coverage from these presentations, some of the highlights on the rest of this week's shows here at NORML Show Live. But for today, I would like to give you some coverage of this that appeared in the Fox News coverage in Houston, Texas. So we go now to Fox Houston for this video.
Earlier this week, televangelist Pat Robertson said adults should be able to buy marijuana just like they buy alcohol.
But the devil's in the details. And today at Rice University, experts grappled with how legalization might look. Ned Hibbert is here now with their perspective. Ned.
Guys, we all know the reasons why illegal drugs, marijuana, are banned, but half of Americans now say marijuana should be legal. And that will actually be on the ballot in November in Colorado and Washington State. So for some, legal pot might not be just a pipe dream much longer.
If we are going to legalize, and it looks like we will in at least some states, we've got a lot of details to work out.
Namely, how to move marijuana and possibly other drugs from the black market to the open market.
Nobody wants to have rocks of crack in the gumball machines at Skeeter's. We know that's not going to happen. What has been most talked about is something similar to the way we treat alcohol and tobacco.
Now, it may be tempting to dismiss legalization as some kind of stoner wish fulfillment. Only in this room, you'll find former mayors and cops, people who say the war on drugs cannot stem the supply or dent the demand.
My team in Ecuador once caught 14 metric tons of cocaine, which is about 30,000 pounds. 6 months later, the price of cocaine had not changed on the streets.
Nonviolent drug offenders pack our prisons and jails. Many of them are minorities.
It's undermining the potential and the future of our community, because clearly, especially the large numbers of African American men that are no longer a part of the labor force, are no longer part of the political process.
Meantime, who's getting rich? The cartels, for one. A Mexican drug trafficker is on the Forbes list of billionaires this year, while the 5-year tally of murders south of the border approaches 50,000.
What's happening in Mexico and in Central America today It's like Chicago during the days of Prohibition and Al Capone times 50.
Gangsters like Capone profited from alcohol prohibition in the 1920s.
My parents decided that alcohol was bad, but alcohol with Al Capone was worse than alcohol without Al Capone. And I think that's basically the choice we have to make.
People legitimately worry that legalization would make marijuana more accessible to children. But when you ask the kids, as one former teacher can tell you, here's what they say.
We can get drugs cheaper, easier than beer. Like, we can't go to the store and get the beer because we're not old enough, but hey.
But I don't think we would see a real increase in young people because they already live in a world of widespread availability, and we've had 30 to 40 years of demonstrating that there's nothing the government can do to change that.
That's interesting. There is some support for legalization from the left wing for humanitarian reasons and from the right wing for economic reasons. In 2010, a proposition that would have okayed marijuana possession in California was defeated by 7 percentage points.
And of course, is Fox in Houston with that news report. Going to more news here, we get from the Los Angeles Weekly blog, marijuana initiatives in California flaming out. This is speaking about that last week, the Americans for Safe Access and its partner, the Bay Area's Food and Commercial Workers Union, UFCW, pulled the plug on the highest profile marijuana initiative aimed for the November ballot. The group's Medical Marijuana Regulation, Control, and Taxation Act would have created a statewide body to police, tax, and generally keep an eye on dispensaries. And for now, supporters seem to be hopeful that a State Assemblyman Tom Amiano will carry the torch with a bill that might extend the lives of pot shops in the state by mirroring the ASA's would-be initiative. But what's more, as the Times notes, fundraising among the 5 marijuana initiatives has been difficult, even as the dispensary business has been largely profitable. Dispensary operators know that broader legalization could lower prices and bring more competitors into their business. Now, in response to that, I decided to go back into my archives to bring you some posts from that era. July 10th, 2010, Stoners Against the Prop 19 Tax Cannabis Initiative is born, the brainchild of one Dragonfly de la Luz, who wrote, "Why pro-pot activists oppose Prop 19? Myth. This is our only chance to take a step in the direction of legalization. Fact. This is only our first chance, and it is not our only choice. This November, volunteers for the California Hemp and Health Initiative, the initiative Jack Harrer supported so much he lent his legendary name to it, will be collecting signatures to be placed on the ballot in 2012. For this reason, we cannot vote for Prop 19 now and then vote in CCHI in 2012 to replace it, because if Prop 19 passed," she wrote, "the more likely scenario is by that time the big cannabis corporations will have all the money, power, and influence needed to challenge any challenge to their monopoly." October 29th, 2010, National Public Radio reports on the influence of the Stoners Against Prop 19 campaign having a perception among cannabis consumers. Quote, De La Luz said she was excited at first to hear California was trying to legalize pot. "I thought it was a dream come true," she says. "Then I read it and realized it was a nightmare." She's now actively campaigning with her group Stoners Against Prop 19. She says the initiative would create too many restrictions. Californians would only be able to legally process, possess, and share or transport a mere ounce of pot, and they would be able to only grow it in a 25 square foot area. As election nears, De La Luz has been debating opponents and trying to convince other pot smokers. Her arguments worked on a man who calls himself Alibaba, who's in California for the marijuana harvest season and stopped by to share a few joints. November 3rd, 2010, Prop 19 has lost by 3.5% and did particularly poorly among the marijuana-growing counties of Trinity, Humboldt, and Mendocino. From De La Luz's blog, Prop 19 was a tragically flawed initiative that ultimately defeated itself by being so poorly written as to be a Pandora's box of unintended consequences. Still, we can learn from its mistakes to draft a better initiative for 2012. We are already working to get the California Cannabis Health and Hemp Initiative, also known as the Jack Harrer Initiative, on the ballot. Thank you to all who saw Prop 19 for what it was and stood up against it, even in the face of ostracism from some members of the cannabis movement. I look forward to working with all cannabis activists and enthusiasts to bring true legalization in 2012. Keep pot for the people and corporations out of cannabis. March 9th, 2012. Wait until 2014. Marijuana legalization all but dead in California. From the San Francisco Weekly, nobody likes to celebrate with a loss, but for the medical marijuana movement, 2010 and the historic defeat of semi-legalization measure Prop 19 already look like the good old days. Feast turned to famine quickly. Multiple marijuana legalization and medical marijuana reform ballot initiatives vied this year and last for a spot on the voters' ballots in November. But United Food and Commercial Workers and Americans for Safe Access withdrew on Thursday their Medical Marijuana Regulation, Control, and Taxation Act, and leading proponents of legalization initiative Regulate Marijuana Like Wine are already looking ahead to 2014. Meanwhile, the three legalization measures are still starving for billionaires. A few weeks ago in LA, proponents for repeal cannabis prohibition, regulate marijuana like wine, and the California Cannabis and Health and Hemp Initiative issued a statement of unity that included a clarion call to rich people. All ballot initiatives were in desperate need of cash. They remain so today. Strangely enough, I can find no blog posts from Dragonfly with commentary on this story. Now, speaking of California and the effects they are facing in their crackdown, we have a report from the San Francisco Weekly under a bill introduced last month by a Southern California assemblywoman. Driving while stoned would result in an automatic DUI offense. The proposed bill would tag this offense onto the section of the vehicle code that addresses drunk driving. This new section states that any level of cannabinoids or synthetic cannabinoid compounds found in a driver's blood or urine up to 3 hours after a traffic stop would equate to a DUI, according to Assembly Bill 2552, which was introduced by Assemblywoman Norma Torres, Democrat of Pomona. However, cannabinoids remain in the body for days or weeks after consumption, according to California NORML. If passed, Torres' bill would essentially criminalize outright operation of a motor vehicle by any marijuana user. So hopefully tokers know enough beer drinkers skilled enough to stay under .08 to designate drive them to work. Torres introduced the bill quickly and quietly. No press release accompanied AB 2552's February 27th unveiling. Now, this, of course, is very troubling. A zero-tolerance bill for THC in the blood or metabolites in the urine. Extremely troubling here because, again, the metabolites stay in your urine for up to weeks or months after one has driven. A completely different scenario than what we're talking about with Washington State and their 5 nanograms of THC in the blood, which is still unscientific and arbitrary, but it has a little more grounding in that a lot of people would be impaired under that limit. With a zero tolerance limit, we're talking about most people being unimpaired. It's sad that either one of these has come in front of the voters and in front of the legislatures. But in the case of this zero tolerance bill in California and the 5 nanogram bill they're trying to pass in Colorado, these are standalone measures. Standalone measures they are using to try to criminalize cannabis consumers, and NORML unequivocally opposes them. In the case of Washington with I-502, it's a 5 nanogram limit that comes with legalization. And legalization is the prime directive. We will always support that. Finally, just one little comment that I have. I want to point out that the NORML Silver Tour, our good friend Bobby Tuna, Robert Platshorn, the Black Tuna, sent us out a press release about the unveiling of medical marijuana billboards in South Florida. 2 48-foot billboards urging passage of a medical marijuana law for Floridians will be unveiled, strategically placed along Pompano's busiest thoroughfare, Sample Road, between Powerline Road and Military Trail, just across from Costco. These signs carry a potent message, and let me bring the sign up to you. For those of you listening on the podcast, it's a sign featuring a man in a wheelchair and a hand holding out a marijuana leaf that says, "Legalize medical marijuana. I'm a patient, not a criminal. Prescribed in Israel." Of course, Florida with a large Jewish population, that might be part of the sale. I'm a patient, not a criminal. And while I appreciate what Bobby's doing with the Silver Tour and trying to pass medical marijuana in Florida, I am once again offended by the notion that because I'm not a patient, I'm somehow a criminal. Healthy people smoke pot too. Let's just say I'm a patient, not an outlaw, because that's what we are. Anyone who's smoking pot, whether it be for medical, religious, or personal reasons, is an outlaw. We're not criminals, not any one of us. We're not harming anyone. And even if you want to argue we're harming ourselves, the harm to ourselves is negligible. It's something you'll see me talk about in my debate with Kevin Sabet that I'm playing later on today. Stick around for the Radical Rant at the end of the show, and we'll talk more about that. And stick around for hour 2 when we'll tear apart the drug warriors' arguments piece by piece.
What do you think about a break, buddy?
I'm running out of voice. It's hard to do when Terry's not here.
Very tough.
Be back right after this.
It's 20 after the hour, and we have to take a short break, if you know what I mean. Please support these sponsors who support NORML Show Live.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would sell you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
I'm Sub Cool from Team Green Avenger. At TGAgenetics.com, we are working on the leading edge of medical strains. Our strains are rigorously tested for THC, CBD, THCV, and other critical cannabinoids. Know your grow. Check out our genetic diversity at TGAgenetics.com, the home of Jelly Bean, Jack the Ripper, Vortex, and other award-winning cannabis strains.
If I were to tell you that in America, right now, over 1 million children sell marijuana, what would you think? Would you think that any public policy that creates over 1 million teenage marijuana dealers needs to be re-examined and possibly amended? You would not be alone. The members of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, aka NORML, have been working since 1970 to reform marijuana laws such that responsible adults, not children, sell and use marijuana. Isn't it high time to reform America's misguided marijuana laws? This is Alan St. Pierre, Executive Director of NORML in Washington, D.C. Only concerned citizens can effectively end the federal government's nearly 70-year-old prohibition on responsible adult marijuana sales and use. Want to know more about how you can help? Contact us at NORML, toll-free, 888-67-NORML, or by visiting the organization's popular and informative webpage at norml.org.
Georgia. Hi, this is Willie Nelson, and I need your help. Our marijuana laws are terribly unfair, and they make criminals out of law-abiding citizens. Nearly 2,000 Americans are arrested every day on marijuana charges, and we are unfairly destroying the lives and careers of hundreds of thousands of people simply because they smoke marijuana. These are not criminals. They are average citizens like you, good neighbors who work hard, raise families, pay taxes, and contribute to their communities. And it's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. We need your help to end marijuana prohibition once and for all. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
It's time for your daily Toker Tunes, the best in 420 friendly music from all genres that uplifts, entertains, and informs the public. Today we bring you tunes for Roots Monday, our celebration of the music that evolved into the popular modern music of today. We pick the best of blues, country, folk, and jazz with a 420 feel and serve it up for you every Monday. If you'd like to submit your song to be played on NORML Show Live, send it to us at stash@norml.org. Now here's some more great independent marijuana music for today's Daily Toker Tunes.
All right, we're going to turn things over to Stanley Jordan for this tune. Stanley Jordan, great jazz guitar player. Followed him for a long time. Love his work. And I just saw the name of this tune sitting in the IOTA promo net. It's called Capital J. And I figure we would roll a capital J and just dig on some jazz. So get it on, Stanley. This is Capital J. Stanley Jordan on your Roots Monday Daily Toker Tunes. From the colleges to the pros, X Games to Olympic Games, and joint rolling contests to bongathons, it's time for Normal Rock Sports. Hey, just a quick note, Herb Thrasher wanted me to pass on from Normal Rocks is that we have our new Reefer March Madness pool. That's right, if you're into bracketology and the NCAA March Madness, you can turn in your own bracket by joining up at cbssports.com. Create yourself an account at cbssports.com and then visit our blog at stash.normal.org and search for Reefer March Madness. We've got our bracket up there. You can compare it to us, see how well you're going to do. It's a simple pool where you get a point in the first round, 2 points in the second round, 4 in the next round, and so forth for every pick that you get right. There's no real prize involved here other than bragging rights amongst all of the cannabis community. Plus, I'm kind of curious to see how well stoners do against the general CBS audience out there. Check it out at our blog, stash.normal.org, Reefer March Madness.
Alternative Medical Choices offers healthcare the way it should be. Easy to access, patient-centered, team-based, and quality-focused. We offer a variety of natural, affordable healthcare treatment options like primary care, group acupuncture, massage, and assistance with OMP registration. As a patient, you will have a team of experts working with you to make you the best you can be. Call Alternative Medical Choices at 503-288-5579 or check us out on the web at altmedchoices.com.
Pod 2.0. It's not your father's Woodstock weed. 5 of the last 7 people to run for president and the last 3 winners have all smoked pot. Marijuana, the gateway drug to the White House.
That just have something to say.
All of us can get a piece of that pie. And the reason we don't have headway is because that 1% can't figure out how they're going to make all the money.
That just have something to say.
Your Sunday morning and Wednesday evening pot and politics immediately following Danny Danko's Free Weed here on
The Libra Lounge.
Podges? We don't need no stinking podges. Oh, no.
Sir, do you think there will or should come a time for us to discuss the possibility of legalization, regulation, and control of all drugs, thereby doing away with the violent criminal market as well as a major source of funding for international terrorism? Thank you so much for your time, Mr. President.
Well, I think this is an entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Name the time and place, Mr. President. At NORML, we've been prepping for this debate for 40 years.
You want answers?
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
You want answers?
You have offended my family.
I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth.
And you have offended a Shaolin temple.
You can't handle the truth.
Surely you can't be serious. I am serious. And don't call me Shirley.
Hooah!
Radical Rant. Welcome back, everybody. It's so great to be back from Houston, Texas. And I tell you, the time that I had there was amazing. First of all, big thanks to William Martin, the senior fellow for religion and public policy there at the Baker Institute, who put together this world-class forum. I mean, literally, first time in my life I've ever been picked up at the airport by a guy in a black suit with a white sign and my name on it. Got to ride in the back of this nice Cadillac from there to the event where the 420 Truth Car was there. Dallas-Fort Worth NORML had brought the 420 Truth Car. Let me get the pic for you here. It's right out front of the Baker Institute. There you go. 420 Truth Car with the green lights flashing so everybody could find out where it was. That night, Thursday night, Rick Steves was giving his talk on the European perspective. And by the way, all of these videos are available through the Baker Institute's YouTube page, youtube.com/Baker Institute, where, by the way, Wiz Khalico's been checking out the data there. I'm, number 2 there all time?
Number 3.
Number
about,
3.
About 200 views away from the number 2 viewed video on that YouTube channel.
Yeah, and that's including like Condoleezza Rice, Pervez Musharraf, the Princess of Jordan.
Plenty of heads of states. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
So, yeah, pretty crazy. Thanks for that, Kaliko. But, so the Truth Card was there. Rick Steves was giving his presentation on the European perspectives on drug policy. You know, basically don't be hard on drugs, don't be soft on drugs, be smart on drugs. Then the next day, the panels began. Dr. Ethan Nadelman, Executive Director of Drug Policy Alliance, debated John J. Coleman, who's the head of Drug Watch International and also was a former administrator in the DEA. He actually had a slide up where he was talking about the different wars on things, like we've had the war on cancer, the war on poverty, George Carlin's war on homelessness, and even one person's war on pigeons in New York City. So you can imagine a drug warrior talking about the war on drugs and comparing it to a war on pigeons. He didn't do so well. The next panel featured a DA from Houston, a judge from Houston, and assistant chief of the Houston Police Department versus Russ Jones from LEAP. I guess I shouldn't say versus. They were all offering their perspectives. And it was kind of interesting how the DA, she started talking about how drug cases were clogging up her court, how her docket was just filled with what they call trace cases. And for demonstration, she held up a Splenda packet and she said, "This is a gram." Actually, she said, "I made a personal point of pride that I have never learned the metric system. I feel it's un-American. But working drug cases has forced me to have to learn some metric system. Folks, this is a gram." And so she holds up that gram, that Splenda packet, and then talks about her docket being flooded with cases where they're getting a speck off of like a fleck off someone's nostril, right? Or the residue in a crack pipe or something like that. And they're charging them with 0.01, 1/100th of a gram, and these people are getting state jail felonies. So at first you think, oh, well, she seems to get it, right? But then she talks about how she wishes Timothy Leary and the people who promoted the drug world would burn in hell. Check those videos out, but I'm going to get right now to my portion here. We'll talk more about this in hour 2. This is me at the Baker Institute and my presentation against Dr. Kevin Sabet. We'll talk more about it in hour 2. Let's get right to it. Good morning, everyone. Welcome, and I just want to say I'm incredibly honored to be speaking here at the Baker Institute. I saw the list of panelists who were going to be appearing here. I saw more letters behind people's names than I see in a bowl of alphabet soup. Right? PhDs and DAs and assistant chiefs and judges, and I kind of got to think, why am I here? My goodness, I'm just a guy who, grew up as a son of a musician. Always been around people that had used marijuana in my life, and now I work for NORML, and I am the chapter outreach coordinator. I help coordinate 177 chapters around the country and around the world, including some fine people from Dallas-Fort Worth and Waco, Texas, who are here today. I also run NORML Show Live on the NORML Network, which is a live daily talk radio show where for 2 hours a day I talk to the people and I interview the people involved, some of the people that are in this room that are involved in fighting this war on drugs. So I think maybe why I'm here is because while I don't have any of that school book education on the issue of marijuana, I have a ton of real world experience here on the issue of marijuana. I'm thrilled here to be with Dr. Sabet, and we've gotten to speak a few times, and he's a wonderful man. And as far as people who have worked for the ONDCP goes, a very gracious person who has told me to my face he does not want to see me put in a cage for my use of marijuana, and I appreciate that. Thank you. But it is kind of intimidating because, the man's going to Harvard and getting a PhD at Harvard. I mean, my biggest academic achievement was I was the Boise State mascot in 1985. Go Broncos. I mean, he's worked in the White House. I once ate at a Waffle House. So, But again, I think where I bring something to this debate is that I have skin in the game. I began smoking marijuana on July 4th, 1990. In a resort town called McCall, Idaho, with the guitar players in the band that I was playing with at that time. And I remember when that joint first went around the circle. And remember, my father is a drug addict and an alcoholic, and I'd always been told, just say no, drugs are bad, MK, don't do it, just don't do it. And when I saw that joint go around, I thought, oh my God, I'm in a band with guys that do drugs. These guys do drugs. And I refused it the first couple times it came around. And I was really shocked because when I did refuse it, I was a little worried because I'd heard about the peer pressure, and they all kind of went, okay.
They just kept passing it around. And after about 4 or 5 or 6 passes of this and them giggling and just having a good old time and not really being any problem, I finally took a puff. And when I took that puff, I went, this is drugs? Really? This is what you were warning me about? I mean, I'd been drinking since age 16. I'd woken up in strange places. I'd had tequila scars. I mean, I puked on my shoes. I've done some terrible things under alcohol. And when I smoked that joint, I went, really? This was the problem? It makes me happy and lightheaded and go to sleep and eat Funyuns? That's what we need to throw me in jail for? This is terrible. So I've got skin in the game. And because of that, under this war on drugs, I have been affected by this daily. The federal law right now for the possession of even a speck of marijuana is a misdemeanor with a possible 1-year prison term and a $1,000 fine. Now, it's probably not going to happen, but it exists. It's there. That law is there. And for the past few years, when I've been living in Oregon, I've been growing marijuana plants. And for just one marijuana plant, the federal penalty is a felony with 5 years, $250,000 fine. And if you're growing a lot of marijuana plants, like this fine woman's son is, you're actually eligible for the death penalty in this country.
And I'm proud of it.
Thank you, Mrs. Lee. Thank you. But a federal death penalty exists. We are one of 9 countries in the world that has a death penalty involved with marijuana. Now, you have to grow over 60,000 plants, make $2 million, $20 million over a certain number of years, continuing criminal enterprise, yada, yada, yada. But the fact exists, we have a death penalty for this plant. A death penalty. In Texas here, we've heard some of the folks talk about that, the misdemeanor, 6 months, probation, $2,000 fine, mandatory rehab. A plant is felony, 12 years, $10,000 fine. In Florida, it's 5-year felony for anything 21 grams or over. 21 of those sugar packets, 21 grams is about 3/4 of an ounce. Felony, 5-year sentence, $100,000 fine, and you lose your right to vote. And in Florida, you lose your right to vote as a felon permanently. After 5 to 7 years, you can apply to a clemency board to maybe get your right to vote back. This has resulted in 8.2% of all Floridians of voting age being disenfranchised and 19.8% of African American voters being disenfranchised in the state of Florida. It's really hard to change the laws that criminalize you when you can't vote to change them. Even in my home state of Oregon, where people think, oh, it's all hippy-dippy, liberal, love fest, pot and love and patchouli and all that. Yes, it is decriminalized. Less than an ounce is a ticket. You do get a 6-month driver's license suspension, even if you weren't driving, and a $1,000 fine. But over an ounce in the state of Oregon is a felony, 10-year sentence, $100,000 fine. We go from 28 grams as a ticket to 29 grams is a 10-year felony. So it isn't even good even in the state of Oregon, where people think it's all hippy-dippy sun and light. And the folks here, and when I saw a slide up there that said, oh, there's only 0.3% of people in prison and 0.1. Well, first of all, sucks for them, huh? But for all the rest of the things that happen that have nothing to do with being in prison or being arrested. First of all, if you've been arrested, you can be considered a drug criminal for the rest of your life. That follows you around. If you're a student, you can lose your financial aid, because if someone's got a drug problem, the last thing we want them to have is a college education. You can lose your federal housing for being arrested for marijuana. It can be used against you in child custody cases. And these aren't just abstracts to me. These are my friends. Every person I know smokes marijuana. Every person I know and interact with directly smokes marijuana. And not just I smoked a joint at the class reunion. I'm talking daily and weekly marijuana smokers, and not just medical smokers, people like me who just like to smoke pot. That's all we like, just like to smoke pot. And even without the arrest, we've got people here like myself who've been living in fear of police officers. When I saw this assistant chief up here talking about, the neighborhoods and the cities, I thought back to all the times when I wanted to call a cop, I wanted to interface with a police officer, but that thought was in the back of my head, better not. Are you sure you don't got something on you? You sure not going to come back to your house and want to check things out? You sure not going to want to bring a dog to your car? How many crimes go unreported? How many women live in domestic violence situations where they won't report the guy beating them because, well, they've got drugs and they might lose their kid? I mean, the tendrils of this are so intertwined, and I talk and deal with these people every day. And the bottom line is that this war on drugs essentially says to me, Russ Belville, the federal government thinks you ought to be in a cage because you like to smoke pot. Now, if you'd like to go home and drink, you can drink Crown Royal until you pass out. That's fine. If you want to smoke, you can buy cigarettes and smoke until you get lung cancer and die. Don't got a problem with that. But if you want to smoke a little pot that never killed anyone, makes you happy and want to eat Funyuns, makes jazz sound good, we got to put you in a cage. And I just think that's fundamentally wrong. Now, to this question, the war on drugs has failed. Is legalization the answer? Well, as Russ Jones, the very well-named Russ Jones said, we don't have a war on drugs, we have a war on people. I have never seen a DEA agent point an automatic weapon at a marijuana plant. But a few of my friends working in dispensaries have had automatic weapons pointed at their heads. A few people that I've reported on have had armor-clad thugs breaking into their homes, throwing flashbang grenades, wearing body armor, shooting their dogs while their children are in the house. But I have never seen them point that gun at a plant. And while it is a war on people, it's not really a war on all people who use drugs. Like comedian Paul Mooney once said, I have the complexion of protection. I'm a middle-aged white guy. I'm not going to get busted for weed. Probably never. Probably never. So it's not a war on people who use drugs. It's a war on some people who use drugs. And wait a minute, it's not even really a war on drugs, because in this society we celebrate drugs. You can't turn on TV without seeing another drug ad. I mean, we got beer ads funding the Super Bowl. We got Viagra ads everywhere. Look, what's up with those two people in the bathtubs anyway? I don't get that. And we got the cartoon depression. Have you seen those drugs from the cartoon, the Abilify, where the woman's got depression? Is your antidepressant not helping? And she's got that robe of depression she wears around. Well, if that pill doesn't help you, we've got another pill to help the pill that doesn't help you. And notice that the depression robe never really goes away. It still kind of hangs out off to the side. We're not curing anything. We're managing it, because that's the comeback. That's where you get the comeback at the pharmaceutical company. So it's not a war on all people who use all drugs. It's just some people using some drugs. And in fact, we celebrate drugs. Even the evil drugs, cigarettes, even the evil one, the one we all know is awful and terrible, we at least tolerate it. I used to work at a company that had paid for by the company a shelter outside, because we're in Portland, Oregon, it rains a lot, right? A shelter outside so the nicotine addicts could go and get their fix. Sounds different when I say it that way than smoke break, doesn't it? Nicotine addicts to get their fix, paid for by the company, and willing to accept the productivity loss of people heading out every 2 hours for 15 minutes to do their drugs. So don't tell me we have a war on drugs, that we think drugs are bad. It's just some drugs and some of the people that are using them are bad. And when we call it a war on drugs, it's not even really a war on drugs, it's a war on marijuana. As was cited earlier, 52% of all arrests in the war on drugs are for marijuana, 88% for possession alone. Here in Texas, it's 97% of all marijuana arrests are for possession, as they were talking about trace amounts and such too. So what we really have here is not a war on drugs. What we have here is a war on certain American citizens using non-pharmaceutical, non-alcoholic, tobacco-free drugs. That's what we have. So the first premise of the question, the war on drugs, is kind of not exactly a true premise. And the other part is, has failed. Has failed at what? What has it really failed at? Because if you look at this with the right perspective, the war on drugs is an incredible success. I mean, if you own pharmaceutical stock and you're worried about medical marijuana competing with Xanax or Paxil or Prozac or any of those drugs, or the opiate drugs that you sell, well, the war on drugs is doing great to keep that natural cheap competition out of your market. If you are an owner of prison stocks, or you work as a prison guard in California, where the median income for a prison guard is $74,000 a year. By the way, speaking of well-funded drug lobby, that's twice my salary. If you're a cop and you want to keep your thumb down on a certain neighborhood and a certain class of people, there's nothing better than the war on drugs for collecting fingerprints, getting people in the system, being able to shake them down, maybe find some other crime they might be up to. And if you're trying to provide jobs for underskilled, undereducated people, those jobs that have flown out to Mexico and China, the factory jobs, the manufacturing jobs we don't have anymore, the war on drugs is an incredible success in providing underground income for people, for keeping unemployment rates below what they would really be if we looked at inner city neighborhoods and tried to find out. I mean, already what's the black unemployment in most inner city neighborhoods? In the 15s, 20s, 30s? How much higher would it be if the kids that were dealing had to apply for unemployment instead? We would see massive amounts of unemployment. So if the war on drugs is all about creating jobs for cops and rehabs and prison guards and kids dealing in the streets, it's an amazing success. But let's take it at its face. Let's take it what we're really intending here. The war on drugs is a failure because of what Nixon said, right? Nixon said we're going to do a war on drugs, we're going to end abuse and dependence and reduce the harms and all that. Well, people who've been up here before have already told you all about that it hasn't really worked. So, is legalization the answer? Well, again, depends. Is it the answer to stopping all people from ever getting high and using drugs and never causing any harms? Not at all. No, no. In fact, if you legalize, as some people have suggested, there might be a slight uptick. There might be some people that had never tried pot who think, well, it's legal now, let me give it a shot. There might be people using pot now who think, oh, well, now that it's accessible and cheaper, I'll use more of it. But again, people are smoking pot now, and I haven't yet seen much harm from that in the first place. Maybe the legalization is the answer if our goal is to reduce harm. The harm of the crime and the prohibition-related violence, the harm of kids dealing in the high school parking lots, then maybe it is the answer. But for this entire question, I reject the initial premise. I reject the entire initial premise that it's any of the government's business or wherewithal or desire to stop me from smoking pot. I don't see the need to do so. I have been an employed citizen. I have worked and paid taxes for 20 years. I've consulted on Wall Street. I've worked in hospitals. I've done IT work, some of the most complex brain mechanics that you can get involved with, doing network analysis and such. I always figure if Carl Sagan could smoke pot, so could I. And it didn't seem to hurt my brain much either. So when people are talking about this war on drugs, you always have to boil it down to the fact that we're talking about arresting people and messing with their lives in an attempt to stop them from smoking pot. And we must address, is that even really something that's worth doing? Somebody said, the DA here said, or the assistant chief, what if we had a stone society? Oh, we'd end up with a stone society. Heaven forbid we have more people that are mellow, get along with each other, laugh, eat some Funyuns now and then. Oh, what a terrible world it would be. Now, I don't mean to diminish the problems of other drugs. I have experience in that realm too. Like I said, my father's a drug addict. My father was addicted to speed. He was addicted to marijuana. He was addicted to alcohol mostly an alcoholic. But for all those years, my dad was an alcoholic, and I was suffering as a child from the things that happened. Him being away for 2 weeks at a time, him getting all drunk and a little wacky in the house, and the terrible things that happened to me as a kid. Not once did any group of cops ever try to break down the door, throw in a flashbang grenade, and haul my dad off for my well-being. Never happened. But if it had been the pot, they'd have done that. We let people be alcoholics, but we don't throw them in prison for it. We do deal with their alcoholism if it causes problems to other people. But for the alcohol itself, we don't throw them in prison. And this is happening not just to random statistics. I mean, I can give you the stats. 102 million people have tried it. 26 million people in America will smoke pot this year. That's more tokers than Texans. You know, they said, don't mess with Texas, don't mess with tokers. Okay? We are nothing to fear. There is nothing scary about us. Our smoking pot is not going to cause us to run riot in the streets, go crazy, start shooting heroin or anything like that. We are productive, responsible, law-abiding citizens. Now I know some of you might see, well, I see those pot rallies and all the tie-dye hippies and long hair and the piercings and the dreadlocks and, you know, they're a little crazy and they support Ron Paul and stuff. Whatever the stereotype you want to put in there. But understand that because of the illegality of marijuana, you're only seeing the tip of the iceberg. The people with nothing to lose. The people who can be out and proud. You're not seeing the doctors, the lawyers, the teachers, the cops even, who use marijuana because they can't be out and proud. They can't talk about this. Now, and one more stat. 2.6 million people in America are just like me. They smoke pot every day this month. 2.6 million people smoke pot every day this month. That's more than the population of Houston, Texas. We cannot have a policy that says the entire population of Houston, Texas are criminals. It makes no sense. And finally, to wrap up, whenever we talk about this war on drugs and the other side wants to talk about what we're going to, what the effects might be, we get a lot of the muddying of the waters with weird statistics, things like, well, we can't legalize marijuana because alcohol and tobacco only bring in $40 billion worth of taxes, but they cost $400 billion worth of social effects. Yeah, that would be scary if marijuana were alcohol or tobacco. But alcohol and tobacco, if I'm not mistaken, kill people and are highly addictive. And marijuana is not. So I'm not scared by that. And there's a whole bunch, we don't really lock people up. Not a whole lot of them. Well, even one person locked up for using marijuana is one too many. And finally, this idea that we want to cut the head off the snake. I heard that. We're going to cut the head off the snake. We're going to go after the big guns. The big guns like Patricia Spotted Crow, just north of us in Oklahoma, who's doing 12 years in prison for the sale of $31 worth of marijuana. 2 dime bags she sold. She's got 12 years in prison, separated from her children. What about the children, right? How about Dale Schaefer and Molly Fry, medical marijuana providers in California, growing marijuana under the state's Prop 215 in accordance and cooperation with their state, county, and local people, busted by the feds, now serving 5 years in prison each. Dr. Fry is a cancer survivor, breast cancer. She was growing it for other cancer survivors. She's in prison. And a friend of mine from Georgia, whose daughter was rousted from her bed in the middle of the night, 16 years old, grabbed by her hair by SWAT teams with assault rifles pointed at her head because some kid in her class knocked her off for having a gram or two. These are real stories happening to real people. So why not legalize marijuana? Why not? Well, it's not harmless, but it's not alcohol. It's not tobacco. It's far less harmful than that. The results we've seen with alcohol and tobacco show that we can legalize the worst of drugs and yet bring down the harm from them through regulation and education. And it separates marijuana from those hard drugs that are truly devastating and cause the faces of meth that we were scandalized by. And finally, remember, when anybody says that we need to continue what we're doing or make cosmetic changes around the edges, they are saying one of two things. Russ Belville needs to be in a cage, or Russ Belville needs to be forced into a rehab he doesn't need, forced to be mandatorily re-educated, forced to be P-tested when he's not causing harm to anyone. Thank you for your time.
Oh, that was so much fun to be able to do that presentation at Rice University. It is online at youtube.com/Baker Institute, where we're reaching into the stratosphere as far as the number of hits, at least for Baker Institute. I mean, I'm not like Reply Girl or anything, but a couple thousand, that's pretty good in my book. Hey, we're going to stick around and talk about this in hour 2. Toker Talk Radio. We'll take your calls. I've seen 810 area code calling in all day long. We'll get you in, but I want to talk a lot about this presentation. So for Ganja John and Wiz Queeco, I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us here at NORML Show Live. Stay tuned for Toker Talk Radio. And until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
This is NORML Show Live, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Take it on one more time. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you
You're
roll
listening
it.
to the NORML Network, where the time is 420, 24/7, 365.